Hello number ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and as you know, today the Pope has been chosen, or should we say elected, because an election in fact it is. Now, regardless of your personal religious affiliation or lack thereof, or your nationality, where you're from, there will be some things that you know when it comes to the election process that of course has to do with the conclave, and perhaps you know about the different colored smokes, but there is a lot to say when it comes to how the cardinals choose the next pontiff. So on this video I wanted to explain it and at the same time maybe talk a little bit about the history of papacy. Let's go. We could describe, in fact, the Papal Conclave as the executive and ancient body responsible for electing the next Supreme Pontiff of the Catholic Church. The term conclave comes from the Latin cum clave, which means with key, because at one point the cardinals that had to decide were locked inside just to try its speed, an otherwise relatively slow and complicated process. You see, what happens inside the conclave is a case of qualified majority voting. There are many cardinals involved. Already in the case of Pope Francis, we're talking 115 out of the 117 cardinals. However, there are no formal voting blocks nor parties. This is different from what is called a qualified weighted majority voting, such as that in the European Union. And even the way weight is given to the votes is different to that of the Parliament, because inside the conclave each cardinal has the exact same weight when it comes to the importance and power of his vote. The voting body is composed of cardinals under the age of 80, each with equal vote, as we said. Now, what sets this aside is that it's a 2/3 majority, so it's not a simple majority, which is one of the reasons why sometimes these elections take forever. Not the case this time. Now, the reason why the process requires a 2/3 majority is because they try to ensure that a certain level of consensus rather than popularity determines the next Bishop of Rome. All of this happens at the heart of the Vatican City, which is an independent city-state of just 44 hectares and about 800 or so inhabitants. This is very small, but it does have a very high symbolic significance. Geographically, it's found inside Italy, but technically, it's its own state. In fact, we could say the world's smallest country. Alright, all of that is great, but let me answer your questions now directly. What's up with the smoke? You probably know that if you see a black smoke, it means that there is no pope, but if you see white smoke, then there was a decision made. Finally, they actually managed to get that 2/3 majority. Whenever they don't reach that required 2/3 majority, that's when they burn the ballots and the smoke is black, so that they can start all over again. The way they achieve the black smoke is because they burn the ballots with damp straw, with the addition of other chemicals that produce the black smoke. Now, when they do reach that 2/3 majority, that's when the white smoke is seen from the outside. And the way they achieve the white smoke is because they burn the ballots dry, or with chemical additives to achieve the white smoke. Why is the Pope dressed in white? You know, the white robes? Well, in reality, first of all, those are not called robes. Technically, they're called a cassock. This is a tradition, but it's not necessarily doctrine. One of the most iconic images of papacy is the Pope's white cassock, a tradition that dates back to 1566, when Pope Pius V, formerly a Dominican friar, chose to continue wearing the white habit of his religious order. As you know, Catholic orders have different colored robes. His successors adopted the look, and it became a visual symbol of the papacy, and that's how it became tradition. Another thing that often happens as a pope is elected is that he is asked whether he wants to take a new name. Oftentimes this happens. For instance, the last pope chose the name Francis because of Saint Francis, but his original name was Jorge. For centuries, popes retained their baptismal names. That changed in the year 555, when a man named Mercury, an unfortunate name for a Christian leader at the time, opted to take the name John upon his election, and since then, popes have almost always adopted new names to reflect the values that they hope to bring into their papacy. Now, even though this is an ancient tradition, it does have very strong contemporary values, as it's not only a way to set expectations for the new papacy, but it is in fact a form of branding. The detailed procedure, which was last revised by Pope Benedict XVI, determines that the ballots are cast in secret. These paper ballots are distributed by 2 masters of ceremonies, then 9 cardinals are chosen at random, 3 as scrutineers, basically voting judges, 3 collect the votes, and 3 are revisers that clearly revise the work of the judges. These ballots are rectangular. At the top, you have the following sentence in Latin: Eligo in summum pontificem, which means I elect as the Most High Pontiff. And then it's blank, so you write the name of the cardinal you think should become the new pope. All of this happens, of course, secretly, and then they fold it twice. Hey noble ones, I noticed that quite a few of you watching my videos are not actually subscribed, so it would be so good and I would really appreciate it if you could click the subscribe button right now, as it really helps the channel and the production. Thank you so much. Now, even though all of this happens behind locked doors, there is a certain level of high ceremony, because each cardinal, after writing and folding the piece of paper, the ballot, then they walk, they hold it. As they reach the altar, they say, I call as my witness Christ the Lord, who will be my judge, that my vote is given to the one who before God I think should be elected. And then they place the ballot. Then these ballots are mixed, and then they are read. Of course, they have to double check, making sure that the number of ballots cast is the same or equal as the number of cardinals who are supposed to vote. In the case of these current papal elections, this didn't take that long, but if it did take longer than 13 days, usually they take a break of 1 day for a moment of prayer, and then they resume the following day. Another thing that people may not know is that when the pontiff dies, this ignites or triggers a whole set of rituals and a meticulous series of choreographed laws. This so-called interregnum period has a name, and it's sede vacante, which means the vacancy of the Holy See. In order to ensure continuity with precision, from the moment the pontiff dies, protocol governs every step. The bodies move to the Sistine Chapel and then to St. Peter's Basilica, where funeral rites will unfold. And usually the Pope is buried within 3 days from passing. This is when the camerlengo, who is a very specific function within the priestly body, kind of means chamberlain, is the one that then needs to sort of ascertain that the Pope is actually dead. And until the 19th century, what he would do is that he would get close to the Pope's body, he would call for his name, and when the Pope didn't answer, then he would state the Pope is truly dead, and then hit him very gently 3 times with a silver hammer. The way I understand it, the silver hammer part is being discontinued. One thing that still happens though is that the camerlengo, the chamberlain, takes possession of 2 powerful symbols of authority, the fisherman's ring and the papal seals. The ring is usually used to validate apostolic letters during the Pope's reign, and it bears the image of St. Peter casting his net. This is normally used to give authority and validation to sort of lesser papal statements, which are usually called breve, shorts. Then you have the papal seal. This is affixed to more important statements and documents that are called bulls, and it depicts St. Peter and St. Paul beside the Pope's name and cross. These objects need to be rendered unserviceable because from the moment the Pope dies, papal authority is paused and the mechanical and diplomatic regulations that occur within Vatican City are halted. This is a symbolic gesture, but at the same time, it does have international and political weight within the Vatican. Tribunals and administrative offices do continue to operate, but only the most limited routine capacity. No diplomatic treaties can be signed, no bulls, no briefs, no papal decrees are valid or permitted until a new pope is elected. And while everyone is waiting, the machinery of the church slows to a whisper. Another curious matter is that in the days of papal states, after the death of a pope, a general amnesty would be enforced. What this means is that if you were in prison for a minor crime, you would be liberated. The day after the pope's passing, the clergy of St. Peter's Basilica, which is about 55 priests, might be a little more now, would make their way to the Sistine Chapel. And this is when they do that because they need to request the pontiff's body, but what's interesting is that up to that moment, the Pope's body was guarded by a very specific order, or monastic order, the penitentiaries, all wearing black robes, and their function is to guard the pontiff's body. So do keep in mind, regardless, during the sede vacante, the authority of the papacy does not pass to the cardinals. It ceases to function entirely. Government, in a sense, freezes. Now, when it comes to election during the papacy of John Paul II, he did actually try to simplify it and turn it from a 2/3 majority vote to a simple majority vote. Now, that was a highly criticized change within the Catholic world, and it did go back to the 2/3 majority soon after. The earliest recorded papal election dates back to the year 236 with the election of Fabian, yet much of what we know before the 5th century is fragmentary at best, so we can't really be 100% sure about the historical accuracy of the information we have. In the centuries that followed, however, the process evolved dramatically. During the Middle Ages, for instance, oftentimes papal elections were battlegrounds for rival factions. To that add influential royal families, imperial envoys from Constantinople or the Holy Roman Empire, monarchs from France or Italy. Everyone wanted to push their own candidate to the throne of St. Peter. The result? Chaos. In some cases, multiple popes were elected, creating schism and confusion. It wasn't until the Third Lateran Council in 1179 that order began to emerge. A crucial reform was introduced. A pope could only be elected with a two-thirds majority of the cardinals. The logic was simple. No factions should be able to have a pope that the rest of the church would reject. However, the problem with this is that consensus became harder to reach. At times, only a handful of cardinals were present, and in 1191, for example, just 8 of the 31 cardinals alive took part in the election, which is one of the reasons why oftentimes cardinals tend to move to Rome to be readily available. However, historically, a key turning point came in 1241, when in an effort to break a deadlock, the cardinals were physically locked inside a building. And from that moment, the term conclave, from Latin conclave, meaning with key, entered history. One of the longest conclaves in history, from 1268 to 1271, lasted nearly 3 years. Alright, but this is what I wanted to share with you today. Let me know if you liked the video, and do keep in mind that I'm going to be live from 5 p.m. Central Standard Time every day, Monday to Friday. So I hope to see you today for my live stream where you can ask me any question and we can continue to talk about this. Thank you, and anything you want. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.